This is a Monty moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano, getting you ready for week 2 already in college football. I tell you, it goes by quick. We just came off of week 1, that 5-day week last week, where we had Colorado and Duke making the big news of the week, where they both won. And if you looked at the AP poll that came out on Tuesday, you saw that Colorado and Duke both did enter the top 25 off their massive wins. We also had, because of that, TCU fell out of the top 25. Clemson went down 16 spots to 25. You also had number 4 Florida State, who jumped up to 4 after their big win, their resounding win over LSU in week 1's marquee game there on Sunday. So if you look at the whole top 25 as a whole real quick, obviously Georgia remained number 1, Michigan 2, Bama moved up to 3 ahead of their big matchup on Saturday night. Florida State moved up to 4. Ohio State did drop 2 spots to 5, USC 6, Penn State 7, Washington, Tennessee, and Notre Dame rounding out the top 10. And just the other headlines, like I said, you do have Duke entering at 21, Colorado 22, and Clemson dropping down to 25 here in the first poll. And, like I said, every week is such an important week in college football because it could change. And, again, it's not just winning, but how you win. And we'll see what happens here as we get you ready for week 2, the third really week, but week 2 officially in the college football season. Now, going into the picks for this week, I got to tell you, this actually was not really that easy of a week to find games to pick. Most of the games that are happening this weekend have kind of low lines. Now, I'm not going to touch lines that are like 35 or 40 points because if I did that with Georgia and Michigan last week, I would not have covered. So even though we had a lot of blowouts last weekend, I stayed away from that. There were 2 intriguing 12 p.m. games that I thought about touching, but I'm just not ready to do it yet. Now, one matchup to watch on Saturday at noon is Nebraska taking on 22nd ranked Colorado. First home game for head coach Deion Sanders there at Colorado with the Buffaloes, but also Matt Rule there at Nebraska to watch as well. So a matchup of 2 new head coaches in different places there. Obviously, an emotional matchup Saturday, James Madison going to travel to Virginia, the Cavaliers' first home game following their tragedy. Obviously, it was their first game back last Saturday against Tennessee. Yes, they got blown out, but really that was a win for the school as they came back following the tragedy that shortened their season last year. But not going to touch those games because I'm just not ready to say that Colorado. I know it was very, very, very great win for them and amazing how 3 of their players performed, but it's a low line. I'm not really going to touch that, but we're going to pick 3 games like we do every week. Last week we went 2-1. I did win with, let's just say I lost with LSU against Florida State, but I did win with Duke plus 13 against Clemson. But 4-2 through the first 2 weeks. Let's see if we have at least another 2-1, maybe 3-0 week. But again, this is a kind of a tricky slate in terms of picks. 3 games that I'm picking that all have single-digit lines, 2 getting the hook, and I'm going really bold with. But let's start at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday with a rematch. Actually, 2 of these games also going to pick are rematches of last year, so that's something to watch as well. But my first game that I'm going to pick here at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday is 23rd ranked Texas A&M traveling to take on Miami, the Hurricanes, and both of these teams are coming off of pretty easy opening victories at home. A&M won 52-10 over New Mexico. Miami 38-3 over the other Miami from Ohio. And like I said, this is a rematch of week 3 last season from College Station there in Texas, which was a 17-9 win for the Aggies. It did put A&M at 3-1, but both of these teams really slumped after that, and they finished 5-7. And they're hoping that this year is going to be something better for them and looking to be revived on offense amongst new talent for both of them. I still think that when I look at this, and A&M is a 4.5-point road favorite in this one, and I think that I like the Aggies a little bit more in this matchup because I think they have a few more talented players. They have a size advantage in the trenches on both sides and skill position players that I think are going to challenge the Hurricanes in this matchup. And I like Miami's talent in the secondary, but this defense was a disaster last season. They were bottom 10 in pass defense. They allowed more than 8 yards per pass. I think that's just going to be enough. The line's a little tricky in this one. And again, I'm just going to say that a couple of times this week, but I think I like the Aggies a little bit more. So I'm going to take Texas A&M laying the 4.5 in this rematch on Saturday in game number 1. Game number 2, just like our first game, both teams coming off dominating week 1 wins. At 6:30 p.m. Eastern, you've got the Cincinnati Bearcats, a year plus removed from making it into the college football playoff, traveling to Aquashore Stadium to take on the Pittsburgh Panthers. The Panthers are 7-point favorites in this matchup. Bearcats dismantled Eastern Kentucky for their first win of the season, 66-13. Former Florida Arizona State quarterback Emory Jones accounted for 7 total touchdowns in that game, completing 19 of 23 passes for 345 yards. You have the Panthers, who opened their season with a 45-7 win over Wofford. It's tough basing a pick like this off of one game, but considering how Cincinnati fell off last year after reaching the playoff and what they lost this offseason, including head coach Luke Fickell to Wisconsin, I'm more convinced about the Bearcats. And then there are trends. Cincinnati has won each of their last 15 September games against non-AP ranked teams. But they've failed to cover the spread in each of its last 5 games as an underdog. And then you have the Pittsburgh Panthers, who have won 16 of their last 17 September home games against non-AP ranked teams. But they failed to cover the spread in each of its last 4 games against non-conference opponents, their last 4 home games against non-conference opponents. So then I go back to the performances, and I'm taking the Bearcats getting 7 points in this game. And I think they're going to actually, believe it or not, I think they're going to win this game outright. I think that Emory Jones is going to have another great game in this spot. I like their talent a little bit more. And I think it said something to how explosive they were. Again, I understand it was against Eastern Kentucky, but I liked how explosive they looked, especially when at times they didn't look as explosive last year prior to their championship run from 2 years ago. So I'm going to say Cincinnati, and I'm getting 7 points in this one. I mean, it'd be nice to get 7.5. At one point, this game was at 8, but it's dropped down to 7. But I still think that Cincinnati's going to, at the bare minimum, keep this very, very close and possibly even win this game outright. So give me the Bearcats getting the 7 at Aquashore Stadium against the Pittsburgh Panthers in game number 2. And game number 3, this has been a game that's been circled on the calendar since they met in Texas last season, another rematch of last year. And how do I not pick this one? 11th ranked Texas going to Alabama to take on the 3rd ranked Crimson Tide. The Tide 7.5-point favorites. And again, like I said, this has been a game that's been circled on the calendar since these two met in Texas last season. I can't wait to watch this one. Of course, hopefully I can watch it at home. It's probably not going to happen because this is an ESPN game, and we all know, like I mentioned in the Montie moment earlier this week, about the dispute that's happening with Charter and Disney. But we're not going to talk about that here. We're going to focus on the games. But despite all the controversy with the game between these two last season, it felt like the Tide have not been the same since that game last year. And for the Longhorns, there's a big key to them for them how to win this matchup: attack, attack, and attack some more. They're not going to beat the Tide on the lines. They're not going to get physical enough to pound away for big yards. But quarterback Quinn Ewers and this passing attack was so good last year early on that I think they're going to be firing away from the start against an already banged-up secondary. And Ewers has more weapons at his disposal this go-around. Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Never, tight end Javon Sanders, and Adonai Mitchell. This is going to be the best receiving corp that Bama will deal with all year. But then you look at Alabama's side here, and there were 2 things that stuck out to me in Bama's win over Middle Tennessee last week. And I know you're saying, Johnny, what are you talking about? It's Middle Tennessee. But 2 things. It was the penalties and specifically the number 2. That's how many penalties Alabama committed against Middle Tennessee last week. And also the turnovers that they gave up against Middle Tennessee, 0. Now, the penalties, it may not seem like a big deal, but in last year's meeting against Longhorns, they were flagged 15 times. Maybe they caught a break that it wasn't 25. But nevertheless, only 2 penalties, which is one of the big things that killed this team last year. Nick Saban's team was very undisciplined last year. And the turnovers also, not allowing a turnover against Middle Tennessee. The Blue Raider defense has been talked about as one of the best in college football at taking away the ball, and they weren't able to do that last week. So also no Bryce Young, no Jahmyr Gibbs, and the receiving corps is a tad questionable, but the offense still rolled, and there weren't any mistakes. So that was very, very good to see. And Jalen Milroe, the quarterback there for Bama, I think he's about to make this offense his. He led the team with 48 rushing yards and 2 scores. He threw for almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Yes, this Texas offense is fantastic. Yes, last year's game should have been a Tide loss. And yes, it's Georgia's world and everyone else is living it. But I'm looking for this Alabama defense to bring it and bring it some more against this Texas Longhorns offense. I actually think when you look at this game, if there was a better play to make in this game, I actually would take the under more than anything else. I know this is going to be kind of bold, laying 7.5 points with Alabama, but they were efficient and sharp in the opener, and I think it's going to be like that on both sides. And everyone thinks the Longhorns are going to fire away on offense, but you know what? Like I said when we did the preview a couple of weeks ago, don't underappreciate Nick Saban. And the fact that this game is at home, I think is a big, big deal in this one. So while the hook is a gamble, I think Bama even wins this game by 10. It might be a little bit closer, but I still think they get it done here. So roll tide, baby. Give me Bama laying the 7.5 in this marquee game of the week on Saturday night. So going with 2 favorites and a dog here in week number 2. I'm taking the Aggies laying 4.5 against the Hurricanes. I'm taking the Bearcats getting 7 against the Panthers. And I'm rolling with the tide, Alabama minus the 7.5 against the Longhorns on Saturday. Well, if you like our college football picks, you'll love our NFL picks. And week 1 of Football Friday for the National Football League premieres Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'll be back hosting that. We've got a lot of surprises in the works. I know I've been saving that all week, telling you that, but best thing to do, please tune in on Friday. You will love it. If you thought our Football Friday picks last year were a lot of fun, we are just getting started. So I will see you Friday at noon Eastern. And of course, if you missed any of our Montie moments, this is already number 8 here in season number 2. Go back and check them out on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. For more, like us on Facebook and X at GameOnETB, on Instagram at GameOn_ETB. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Montalbano NY. Like I said, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network, where if you like our Monty Moments and all of our content, leave us a like. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. And of course, now more than ever, have your notifications set so you never miss another Monty Moment or any of our content. Of course, check us out at etbpodcast.com, our official website, for great blog posts from all of our ETB contributors. And if you're on the go, check us out on wherever you get your favorite podcasts if you're on the go to listen to us there. I'll see you Friday for the Football Friday and next week for more Monty Moments. Have a great weekend, everybody. This has been a Monty Moment, and I'm Johnny Montalbano.